In today's episode, I'm going to be reacting to a martial arts video that claims to be for self-defense. I think it's worth noting that I've been involved in martial arts in some capacity for a majority of my life. I started wrestling in middle school. I've competed in all types of combat sports for a majority of my adulthood. And I say all this to say that I'm not speaking on this topic from a place of ignorance. I've got experience in combat sports as well as experience in real violence. Before we get too deep in this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the insights, strategies, or tools that we are trying to bring to you. See, this channel is dedicated. It's designed to empower you, the church leader, to create a community that is both inviting and secure. See, it seems church communities oftentimes struggle to do both. We're either inviting or secure. We struggle to check both boxes, but that's what this channel is all about, to empower you to have a community that is, in fact, secure, but also inviting. Now, the reason I've chosen to react to a martial arts video is because martial arts can offer its practitioners tools that help them survive violence. This video specifically is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu video, and there are some very real, applicable tools that you can learn in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. However, there are multiple variables that create a vast difference between combat sports and real life violence. But instead of me shooting from the hip and talking about martial arts and how to survive violence, let's just go ahead and jump into this video.
When we're talking about things in more of a street self-defense context, and what that means, that could mean that either I have some forewarning, some pre-fight cues or indicators that something is going to happen, or it could be a very much a surprise attack.
So, and there's this book called The Gift of Fear, written by Gavin DeBecker. It's actually a fairly old book, but it's so good. One of the ones that, if you follow me for any amount of time, you're going to hear me referencing Gavin DeBecker and The Gift of Fear. But one of the things that Gavin DeBecker points out a number of times throughout the book is he really stresses that there very rarely are acts of violence ever out of the blue. Like, you might hear people say things like, that active shooter, there were no signs, or like, we never saw it coming, until you wait like a day or two, and then you start to realize that there were all kinds of pre-event indicators. So one of the things that I like what this guy is saying in the opening is talking about indicators, but then he mentions it may have come out of nowhere. The likelihood that it's coming out of nowhere is very slim. So first line of defense is always going to be situational awareness. Make sure you got your eyes up. You've got your ears open. You don't just have them filled with, headphones. Make sure you're looking around and you're looking like you've got some intent, and you're awake. You're not just sleeping while you walk.
Either way, I still want to kind of look at a formulaic approach as much as possible. And that is, I need to recognize the distance. I need to recognize what's the potential for damage in that distance. What can he do to me from each range? And then how I can manipulate that distance to my favor and to his disadvantage. So in the case of, like, if he's trying to swing a punch at me, and this may be a sucker punch that I had very little forewarning about, just enough time to like get here and be able to block out and get my head into a safe range. Then from here, I want to get myself to a different zone where I'm not as in the immediate threat as in front of his arms or between his arms. When I go to do that and establish a clinch here, this way, now I'm pretty safe from the elements that he can use to strike me, or at least strike me effectively. And then from here, I can look to take him down, whichever way his posture is dictating that's going to be the most efficient way to do. In other cases, he closes the distance for me. I don't have to crash that distance. In the cases where he grabs a hold, then I have to recognize from here energetically, is this a push or a pull energy? And I have to respond appropriately. If he's pulling and I pull away, the stronger person wins, and I don't want that to be the fight. If he's pulling me in here this way, that's why I'm going here to try to separate this grip from here. I try to step across to help get extra leverage here this way, and then end off with a strike to maybe disengage from there, or maybe continue on with other combative measures.
So here, real quick, one of the problems that we're going to run into, especially with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which this is what this guy is a black belt in, is they don't really train punching or kicking. That's not really in the curriculum, right? So one of the problems that we run into with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a self-defense, as a as a self-defense tool is oftentimes you don't learn anything about kicking or punching or headbutting or like hurting or injuring your attacker. And that's one of the things that we have to do those things. See, there's this other great book um, called When Violence is the Answer by Tim Larkin. And he talks about how techniques can get you killed, but principles will keep you alive. That's my version of his quote, which his version I'm sure is so much more eloquent. But that's basically the idea is sometimes these techniques look really good, but it takes a long time to learn. So if somebody's got you by your shirt and you know that you're supposed to come down with your elbow, it might not work as great as it does for him because he's been doing this probably for 10 to 15 years or more, based on the fact that he's got a black belt. Still some good technique, but as strict self-defense, I wouldn't lean into that. There are some other things that you can do.
Sometimes the attack doesn't even come from the front. Sometimes it's from the back. In the case of where he sneaks up behind me, I have to recognize energetically then, what's he doing to me? What weapons is he taking away? He didn't try to strike me from the back, he grabbed a hold of me. So then I have to recognize again, is this pushing energy, pulling energy? I need to establish my base and get myself to a position I'm harder to move around. So then in that case here now, I'm not still great, I'm facing my back to him and he's facing his front to me, so he has the positional advantage. But if I can change the structure and the relationship of our bodies together, now I've really put myself in a more advantageous position where my center line is facing him more and his is off. I now have the inner...
Now, before he does, I know what he's about to do. He's about to pick this guy up. Before he does this, anybody that's watching, you might not be able to pick this person up. That might not be a reasonable move for you to make. However, if you look at this position right here and your attacker is a male, there are some things that you can do to create some intense pain on your male attacker, so that you can get away, so that you can survive this violent attack. The problem that we run into, like I've said before, with things like jiu-jitsu that try to, paint the picture of this is for self-defense. Oftentimes, these kinds of things take lots of time, lots of resources, big investments in order to perfect these types of techniques. So I think this guy's coming from a good place. However, if this isn't a technique, I like to teach people things that they can use this weekend or use this afternoon, things that you can pick up very quickly and you don't have to get a bunch of repetitions in before you can do it proficiently. So this is fine. However, it's probably not going to be efficient unless you get some time in a gym with a training partner and you do it lots of times. And even then it's still going to be ugly because violence is ugly.
The ability to manipulate his posture by either throwing or tripping and falling there. So across all these, I have to recognize the energy, have to recognize the structure, how he's manipulating or trying to manipulate mine, and how I can put myself in a more advantageous position against him.
So I think overall, the guy's probably coming from a really good place. And he's coming from a singular place of jiu-jitsu. And, when I first started doing martial arts or combat sports, I came to combat sports from a place of trauma. I had lost a friend who had been murdered, and I wanted to learn how to defend myself. I was a good Christian boy, pastor's kid who never got into a fight growing up. I was always taught to walk away from fights. The bigger man always walks away. But what happens when the bigger man cannot walk away? Well, there's got to be something else to do. And so because of everybody's recommendations, jiu-jitsu is self-defense. I took jiu-jitsu as self-defense, but then I realized there were a lot of problems with that as a concept for self-defense. Not all fights, rarely do fights happen on a wrestling mat. Most fights happen on concrete. At best case, maybe some grass, but still, you know, you rarely want to be rolling around on concrete. Rarely are fights one on one. You've got to, especially as a man who has some level of considerable size, if I become a target, it's probably not one on one. So I can't just lean on jujitsu. That doesn't mean I haven't used jujitsu techniques to help save my life in certain acts of violence. You know, I've used people's suit jackets, cross collar choke, in order to control people, to get them to comply. I've used those kinds of things. However, it takes lots of time, lots of repetition, in order to get proficient at those kinds of techniques. Now, one of the questions is, Preston, this is a church security channel. Why are we talking about violence? Why are we talking about surviving violence? Why are we talking about fighting on a church security channel? Well, the reason is because I think the church has an inappropriate relationship with violence. By and large, I think a lot of Christians, a lot of believers have an inappropriate relationship with violence. We look at violence as if it's sin because bad people use violence to cause sin. So oftentimes we equate violence as sin, but it's just not true. Violence is a tool. And if a hammer or a screwdriver can't be sinful, you can use those things to commit sin, but they aren't innately sinful, then violence can't be innately sinful either. In contrast, I believe it's our duty, especially as men of God, to defend those who can't defend themselves, to uphold people's rights, to protect people who are innocent. I believe it is our obligation and responsibility to do those things. And sometimes, most of the time, we can use our voices. Most of the time, we can set policies and we can stand, just simply stand for what's right. But every once in a while, somebody comes along and tries to take our rights away. Every once in a while, somebody comes into our churches, into our communities, and tries to forcibly remove the innocence from kids. And I think in those moments, it is most right for us to enact appropriate violence in order to protect those who can't protect themselves. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you've got a question, I'd love to see your questions in the comment section below. I'd love to connect with you. I'll see you in the next video.